Welcome to EyeRich History, to know about Native American history, culture, and tribes. In this video, we're exploring a pivotal moment, the moment Native Americans reclaim their ancestral lands, a moment rooted in both hope and tragedy. The history we'll uncover here begins long before the American Revolution, at a historic meeting at Fort Niagara in 1763. Native American leaders from diverse tribes gathered to form a new alliance with the British. But this event not only shaped the future of their lands, it also laid the foundation for future conflicts and broken promises. In 1763, King George III made a surprising declaration that momentarily changed the fate of Native Americans across North America. His Royal Proclamation stated that British colonies could no longer seize native lands without treaties. For the first time in colonial history, Native American rights to their ancestral lands were acknowledged by a major European power. But what did this really mean? I will explain. King George's decree established a vast Indian reserve, a monumental acknowledgement of native sovereignty. This reserve stretched west of the Appalachian Mountains, a region newly taken from the French after the French and Indian War. At Fort Niagara, the news of this proclamation brought 2,000 Native Americans together to celebrate. These chiefs believed the British were now their allies and protectors of their lands. Wampum belts were exchanged in a ceremonial affirmation of peace. But as they gathered in celebration, no one knew that this proclamation would set the events that led to the loss of most of their lands. To understand why this moment was so critical, we must step back to the French and Indian War. Britain and France had been vying for control of North America, particularly the fertile lands of the Ohio River Valley, lands that native tribes had called home for centuries. The war ended in 1763 with the Treaty of Paris, reshaping the entire map of North America. Britain claimed Canada and all lands east of the Mississippi River, but this new territory came at a cost. British settlers, eager to claim these lands for themselves, now saw Native Americans as obstacles in their path to expansion. On the other hand, Native Americans, who had already been steadily losing land, now feared that this new territorial shift would lead to more encroachment on their lands. Their fears would soon become a reality. As tensions grew, the famous Ottawa chief, Pontiac, rallied a confederation of tribes in what came to be known as Pontiac's War. It was an open rebellion against British settlers and their expansion into native territories. Pontiac's forces attacked British forts, including a failed siege on Fort Detroit. The uprising was brutal. Hundreds of settlers were killed, and panic spread across the frontier. Though Pontiac's War did not result in a decisive victory for Native Americans, it was enough to worry British officials. They saw that further conflict with native tribes could threaten their control over the new territory. In response to these tensions, King George issued the Proclamation of 1763, creating the Indian Reserve to limit British settlement beyond the Appalachian Mountains. This was meant to reduce violence between settlers and Native Americans and keep peace along the frontier. However, for the British, this was less about protecting native lands and more about maintaining order in their expanding empire. Sadly, the promises made in 1763 were short-lived. Just 13 years later, the American Revolution would void the Indian Reserve entirely. British laws did not bind the newly independent United States, and new policies quickly emerged, which dictated how land could be acquired from native tribes. The Non-Intercourse Act of 1790, while recognizing Native Americans as sovereign entities, laid the groundwork for future land treaties, many of which were signed under pressure or outright deception. Native Americans were pushed westward, their ancestral lands slowly shrinking under the weight of manifest destiny. By the early 19th century, the U.S. government enacted policies of Indian removal, forcing entire tribes to leave their homelands in exchange for unfamiliar and often inhospitable lands further west. The infamous Trail of Tears is just one example of this painful chapter in Native American history. What began as a proclamation to protect native rights turned into a systematic effort to remove tribes from their lands. The history of Native Americans' fight for their ancestral lands is one of resilience, courage, and survival. The Proclamation of 1763 may have marked a temporary acknowledgement of their rights, but the struggle continued for generations. Even today, Native American tribes continue to fight for recognition, land rights, and the preservation of their cultures. If this history resonates with you, kindly subscribe to EyeRich History so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.